Okay, welcome. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I'm Shireen Anayatollah. I'm a professor of English here at York College. I'm so excited this event is taking place. I'm serving as the light facilitator for this fantastic discussion that's ahead. And I just wanted to go around the circle and have you all introduce yourselves, say a little bit about yourselves, whatever you would like to say. Also, one thing I should say is my pronouns are they and she. Okay? It does no specific order, whatever you would like.
It's fine, I'll get it out the way, get the nerve out the way. Hello everyone, I am Chanel Lopez. I am a trans advocate and activist. I currently work for the city. However, I am here as an individual activist, and I was born and raised in Spanish Harlem and moved to the Bronx. Why I got into this type of work was because I am a survivor of domestic violence and sexual violence. And when I tried to report it to the police, I was told, well, technically you was born a man, so you should kind of take care of yourself. So with that telling me, I was like, wait a second, if this is the way that my trans brothers and sisters are being treated when they're encountering any type of violence, then maybe I need to be that person to make that change. And that's how I got into this role.
I'll go. AJ Mattioli. I am a director advocate. I go by he and him pronouns. I am very lucky to have had a pretty easy life, I will say. My coming out story is, for me, very amusing. When I was in fourth grade, I was about to receive communion like a good little Catholic girl, and I kind of freaked out that I had to wear a dress, and I really wanted to wear a tuxedo, and my mother bribed me with a Nintendo game to wear a dress, and I still feel that I came out a winner in that one, because like I'd still take a video game and wear a dress if that's like in a negotiation, you know. So I was very lucky, and then I came out officially as bisexual. And you know, I did the steps. I came out as bisexual first. My parents were very accepting of that. And then a couple of years later, I came out as a lesbian. And then you climb up that step ladder. And then I came out as trans about 10 years ago when my nephew was born. I got a picture frame that said what an aunt means. And every time I heard Aunt Jana's my birth name. Aunt Jana just didn't feel right, so I changed it to AJ, which now officially stands for Anthony Joseph, but I still say, my family all knows that it stands for Aunt Jana. So I kind of love the fact that my nephew, who's 10, so he's still figuring himself out, but I'm super happy that he named me because we're very connected. So I'm very blessed in the fact that I have a very accepting family. And I hope that because I have a positive family relationship, I hope that I'm able to bring out my advocacy bring that warmth to the community that kind of really needs it. And I do that a lot through filmmaking. And yeah, that's me.
How much do you want us to speak here, please? So my name is Melissa Sklarz. She and her are pronouns. I transitioned in 1991. In those days, I was homeless with a serious drug habit. To today, I was the first New York transgender person to be a delegate at Democratic National Convention from New York. First transgender person in America to be a member of the Electoral College. This year I ran for the New York State Assembly. I've lobbied for transgender civil rights, city, state, and federal level. And I'm here today to talk about trans identity.
Well, I guess I'll go next. My name is Sasha von Stievenhoven-Brown. I'm born and raised from Queens. I'm an intersex trans woman of color, clearly. Most of my activism is online social media because that's what the kids do nowadays. Yeah. I'm here because I feel like my voice needs to be needed, and I feel like I'm the woman that I wanted to be when I was younger, and I want to be that for all the other trans women. That's it.
Hi, my name is Jimena Lucero, and I was born and raised in Queens. I was born in Brooklyn. I was raised in Queens. I am a poet, an artist, and that's how I do my activism, through art. And I've been student organizing for 4 years. Throughout college, I was student organizing. Now that I'm out, done with college, I've just been working, organizing events around the trans community and trans people with disabilities and trans people of color. And I'm excited to be here with all of you.
Hi, I'm Asher. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a non-binary librarian. Most of my activism is focused around disability activism, but I also like to work to make queer activism more accessible.
I'm Seethal. I am an immigrant from Sri Lanka and India. I came over here about 10 years ago. Presently resigned to a 9-to-5. Used to do a lot of activism work because you need to survive, you need to make money. But still continuing to do whatever I can via business.
Great, thank you. Would anybody in the outer circle like to introduce themselves? The second ring. Feel free to step in if you would. Oh, wonderful.
Do you like it?
Oh yeah, you need to be mic.
There you go.
I feel like holding close to me.
No, just point it at your mouth.
Okay. My name is Shamikwa Luswick.
Hold on. We're just going to pause for the garbage can to go by real quick. Sorry, we have to do this every once in a while. At least the band's not playing.
Speaker, the garbage.
I know.
Yes.
Okay, and whenever you're ready.
Okay. My name is Shamikwa Luswick. I don't exactly have a full coming out story because I'm not out to my entire family. I kind of wanted to just mention one thing in particular is I kind of went through stages in a way like you did when I entered my 9th grade year of high school. I thought I was transgender. Because in my head I had to be a boy to love women. It was a reality for me. That's just the way it worked. And so I remember particularly, I had spoken to my social worker about it, and she kind of comforted me about it, told me it was okay. And so I'd done all this research, breast reduction research. I've always been not really comfortable and confident in my body for numerous reasons. So I assumed, yeah, this definitely makes sense. I'm transgender, that's why. But I'm lesbian, and I remember my auntie was coincidentally watching a breast reduction video on YouTube when I got home. And so I kind of slipped it out that it's something I was interested in because I thought I was transgender. And my auntie immediately told my mother, and it became this whole thing where my mother was explaining to me how dangerous it is for people of that community. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, but they can't just not be who they are. So, but eventually through my years of high school, I realized I'm not transgender, I'm lesbian, and I should be proud of that, and there's no reason I have to be a man to love a woman. So that's my coming out story. And then of course my mom discovered I was a lesbian, and that's a whole nother charade. But yeah, so that's my coming out story, if you can call it that.
Thank you so much. Anybody else? Okay, so one of the things that we wanted to hear from all of you about is just your connections to Queens, the work that you're doing, but also to New York City more generally. So who would like to start us off talking about the work that you're doing that's local? I mean, it sounds like there are a lot of really good connections here.
Yeah, I could talk about myself all day. So I didn't mention before that I was born in Queens. I was born in Whitestone. I always like to say Whitestone heavy on the white. It is not a diverse neighborhood at all. People think that Queens is the 7 train, and sadly, once you get on a bus and go a little bit farther than the 7 train, things get a little dicey when it comes to acceptance of anybody that's a little bit different. Like I said, though, my parents are hippies, and they're very, very accepting, and they, showed me around. But I always kind of felt like I needed those people to see different things in different advocacy and different worlds. And my neighborhood's also very small, so once I became a filmmaker, everyone in my neighborhood, for good or for bad, want to see my work, whether that was to judge it or not to judge it. The fact of the matter was a lot of people that haven't seen LGBTQ films, that haven't seen a correct representation of people of color, people who haven't seen good representations of people with disabilities, and I felt like this is who I really wanted to connect with. So I made a movie called Words. It's a documentary, and it's filmed entirely in New York City. It's been called a love note to New York City, which wasn't the intention, but I love New York, so it came out. And within that film, I got to interview a lot of amazing advocates within the community, both from transgender advocates like Shakina Nafak from Difficult People to drag queens from Hell's Kitchen like Bob the Drag Queen. Yetta Kurland was a lesbian. I got to meet amazing people and talk about their identities. And I expected the question to be, how do you identify, and answer to come back, very simple and very like, I'm a boy, I'm this age, I'm gay or straight, where really no one answered like that. Everyone kind of answered in a much more broader sense, making, new words on how they want to identify and how they see themselves. And that movie came about when I was kind of trying to figure out if I was non-binary or fully going by masculine pronouns. And that movie kind of saw me through it, and it changed me while making it. And luckily enough, I will say that I've gotten a lot of people in my own neighborhood to watch it, and maybe not change their vote completely, but at least have them thinking a little bit more outside the box. And I'm very happy that that's happened. Through that, and living in Queens, I've gotten to meet people like Danny Drum, who's amazing politically, and I've gotten to work with him on things like the Lavender Line, which was the 25th anniversary of the Queens Pride Parade, which was exciting last year. So that's pretty much what I'm doing, and I have my next documentary right now. We just teamed up with DeJourne International, who is a trans-owned non-for-profit, and he's a person of color, and I really respect him, and his work is amazing, and we're teaming up for a documentary series called My First Time, which is a play on that phrase of when everyone says my first time, they think of the first time they had sex, where this is actually, when was the first time you were called a slur? When was the first time that you realized that you were different? And we'll have fun conversations within that. When was the first time you had, consensual, fun sex and questions of that sort. But we're going to be really kind of just getting more interviews of people in the trans community and getting it out there in film format. This way you can see it. And that's what I do.
So this year I live in Woodside, Queens. I call it Woodstoria. It's north of Northern Boulevard. It's east of Astoria. I own a home there, which is a wonderful story. And so this year I ran for New York State Assembly. So the district is the 30th Assembly District, and it runs from Woodside, Sunnyside, a touch of Long Island City, Astoria, Maspeth, and Middle Village. About white. Yeah. They loved me in Sunnyside, Woodside, and Astoria. They hated me in Maspeth and Middle Village with a passion. And so what was I talking about? I talked about property taxes. I talked about housing, education, pay for teachers, women's reproductive health, protection for immigrants. How was I described in the media? Transgender activist. I've outgrown that. And Queens said, girl, you have. And so that's important for me, that I see myself as doing this, and this. And unfortunately, the mainstream culture says, yeah, well, we're going to define you in spite of that, and here's how we define you. And so it's important that I'm here today. I do great in Queens. I do wild and crazy things. I go to the gym, and I go scuba diving. So, I've created a world that works for me. And I tell my friends, I keep forgetting I'm transgender. Thank God you all remind me. It's been a long time, and there's got to be what I thought was a graduation point, and so the Queen's media said maybe not, and so the amount of time and money I've spent to be Melissa is frightening. I've got to tell you, and so. I can't say I'm disappointed, a little disappointed at that, to be put back in this box that I had thought I had outgrown, and the good news is I've got years of advocacy, years of leadership and activism, and now what I do is everything I've learned, I teach the new generation of great leaders like Tabitha and like Chanel. I met Chanel, she was a club kid, now she's a great leader for us all. And that's good. That's a good role for me. It's a good fit. I want to be supportive of a new generation of trans people, trans voices and visions and language and identities. And it's like, I don't know any of this, and it's important that I learn and support you as we take our trans identities, our trans cultures to the next level. And that's it.
Thank you, Melissa, and thank you also for reminding us that Tabitha is here. Hi, Tabitha. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tabitha Gonzalez. I'm from Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. So your college is actually amazing. I had the really great tour coming all the way from the other side and trying to make it over here. So the whole time I'm puzzling my mind trying to figure out what to say, and I'm hearing as the narratives go around. So I could tell you a little bit about TILDEF. So TILDEF is one of the nationals one of the top 3 national transgender rights organizations in America. So we do a lot of services by providing name changes to gender nonconforming, non-binary, and trans individuals. So for me, living my life as trans and understanding that when I'm in this type of forum, I can't speak for each lived experience here, and I understand that my identity does not encapture the whole gender expansion of what trans is actually presented to be. So I know for me coming up, it was very difficult, to find myself. So not to jump ahead of the car, is that what we're doing right now?
Okay.
Perfect. All right, so I'm a little late. I'm so sorry, and I apologize to all you, but I ran here because it was important for me to be here for you. So I'm here, and I just want to tell you that my journey has been one that I don't say that I was conforming or conform to a colonized way of thinking because I chose to live my life as a woman. I always felt that way. What was conforming to me was trying to live my life as a man, which was something that I was not. Right? I do understand that I'm born male, but I live as a woman. So I did everything medically necessary for me to make a transition, so I'm comfortable in my body. But as I could dial it back, I can actually say that me being trans, a binary trans woman, does not, represent the whole trans community, because we all each have different identities, and it's okay. It's okay for you to be gender fluid. It's okay for you to define who you are, because no one is the identity police. No one gets to tell you what you consider is normal. And I know when we get to these lines of intersectionality and intergenerational, and as humans evolve, so does the language. I come from a history of people who identified as women living as trans experience. Then we had transvestites. Then we had other identities. And always those narratives were told by trans women, for me, right? And then there was dykes and lesbians and butches and trans men, right? So as we evolve, so does language, because that representation does not mean that it has to be a defining masculine or feminine to identify as whoever you want to identify as, right? So it's difficult for me because it's also new. But I'm such a respecter of persons, and I love people, so it's important for me to be here to learn from you and for me to share my experience with you. I had a very great conversation this morning, and I would be remiss if I don't mention their names. Notice I said they, because that's how they identify, and they are trans, and they do matter. and their name is Ralphie, and they happen to be the child of Chanel's. And we had this great progressive conversation this morning about identities and what that meant to each person who is trans. And I was overwhelmed. We were just, and that's kind of probably why I was a little late, honestly, because this conversation was so good, because as we come into this space and we share our experience and we share our narratives, we understand that whoever here identifies as trans may not necessarily be a binary trans woman or a binary trans man, but you are not invalid. You are trans, and if that's how you choose to identify, then that's who you are, and I don't get to tell you that. The administration does not get to tell you that you are going to be identified based on the genitalia that you were assigned at birth. It is not fair. It is not their right. You have the right to identify your body. You have the right to identify your whole self, and no one gets to do that. And how we do that is we honor the intersectionalities of gender, and we form an alliance, and we come together, and we challenge that. And we create a better world where my son, who identifies as a trans man, don't have to deal with some of the same discriminations and injustices that I face coming up trying to live my life. So it's about me paying it forward, and that's what Tabitha Gonzalez is here for, to actually be the voice of those who are not necessarily recognized, or I don't like to use words like marginalized, because we do, like, I don't want to get into this whole trauma race and victimizing and who suffers the most violence and the most, I don't want to get into that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that no matter who you are, you have the right to identify yourself, and you matter. And that's it. Yeah.
Anybody else want to pick up on any of the threads that Tabitha brought up?
Oh, you're welcome. I'm sorry.
I mean, like, where she said as everybody can identify as they please, like, that struck with me, because I had my gender confirmation surgery August 28th on my 26th birthday. And I've had multiple people throughout the community ask me why didn't you get your face done? Why didn't you get breasts? Why didn't you get this? I said, what makes me a woman is me identifying as a woman. And for so long, just like they said, they thought that they had to transition to love another woman. For so long, I thought I could not identify as a lesbian because I was born male. It took so long for me to understand what identity truly is. It took so long for me to understand that femininity can be anything. I can be butch. I can wear this dress like with these dots, and I can be a woman. I don't need inches. I don't need makeup. I don't need all these things to make me a woman. November 3rd, Cethel, my wife, and I, we put down a deposit on a house, a 10-bedroom, 4-bathroom, 2-kitchen house. And we are housing queer people of color. We have not slept for an entire month because I want a community house. Because for so long I've heard of community, and I have not seen community, okay? When I say community, I want to see everybody. I want to see people that look like me. I want to see people that have lived like me. For so long, the forefront of our community has been white faces, white problems. And I understand that, yes, these people have those problems, but lived experience and learned experience are two different things. And what I want my home to be is a safe space for anybody who needs it. If they need to crash, if they want to have a party, because all the girls are DJs, all the girls have been in the club. I'm not gonna lie, I've been working 12 to 12 and I'll be in the club on the weekend because my rent is due. We do what we have to do to make a community, and being here, it speaks volumes to me. The energy that is in this room, I'm a very spiritual person. I know you see my crystals. I know you see my crystals. And like the energy that's in here, we need this. Queens needs this. All of New York needs this. Because one voice is not enough. It takes an entire village. There are so many ethnicities, there's so many religions, there's so many genders and spectrums in this room that I'm just overwhelmed. And I'm just so thankful for every voice that is here. Because yes, I can't speak for anyone, but I can speak for myself and for the woman I have been trying to be for years. For the woman that I am, because I only have been Sasha since February of this year. And now I am her for the rest of my life. That's what I have to say.
I love you. I love you. I mean, I love you. Oh my God, like, amazing. It's so amazing to be in this space and to feel that energy. You see my crystals? So, I just think that it's so great that we have an opportunity, and thank you to whoever, like Larry and everyone else who actually participated in making this happen, because this is powerful. I was a little bit hurt coming through because every time I asked for the LGBTQ synopsis, I had like this strange look. Like, oh, it was some picture downstairs and I think they're over there. And I was hurt. I was like, really? Is that, we're just somewhere down there? You couldn't just tell me the right direction? And it's because I'm not within a community that recognizes and accepts me. And I don't want to say accepts because I don't think it did with a level of acceptance. Maybe it's just lack of communication, right? But the thing is, that's not when you walk into, and me being a black transgender woman, walking into spaces and not seeing myself represented can be very triggering, can put up different levels of barriers that I don't feel safe. So creating a safe space where queer, brown, and black people can go to have a safe space speaks volumes because we necessarily don't have that. And it's so important that we do. It's so important that we recognize that while we are identifying and choosing to identify, whether you may be non-binary, genderqueer, however you fall on the gender spectrum, I am not your enemy. My binaryism, or me choosing to live in the binary, should not offend you or disqualify you from your existence. And most of the times why we don't have community, because there's those invisible lines that we don't talk to, that we don't nurture to, that we don't educate. So we come in and somehow my story, my narrative must take place before yours because I wasn't visible as you are. We have to stop that. We have to understand that I can't go unless you go. You can't go unless I go. And we got to get there together. And how you do that is community. And community can be different from many different people and mean different things. And I'm talking culturally, spiritually, emotionally. It's different. I have a strong community of women that keeps me accountable. And one of them is standing right next to me. And I love my woman. I love my family member, Rafi, so much. They challenge me every day to get it right, to be open-minded. But this is how we do it. This is how we do it. Yeah, it was a little thrown off, but I'm more happier now than ever, even though I had to like literally run across and take off my sneakers and put on the shoes and run up the escalator. And the girl said down there, I said, there's more? She said, yeah, so I mean, just thank you for having the space and having me here and allowing me to share. I can tell you so much about Till Death, but I challenge you, or I adjure you to go to the website and you can see the levels of educations that we provide in regards to know your rights trainings. It's very fluid, it's very accepting, it's very affirming. I know what it meant for me to change my name, to have a name that matched my identity. That may not necessarily be someone else's story. They may not need to change their name. They may not need to go and get cosmetic surgeries, but they still matter. And they need to have a space where they go and they're represented and they feel a part of, because for so long we will oppress each other in our efforts to get ahead. And it's so unconsciously that we do that, and we need to stop. So Till Death definitely welcomes gender nonconforming, non-binary, and trans people to all the services that we are able to provide you, whether it be education, name change. Call me. I can give you, like, we can talk. You know, I'm kind of the nurturer. I'm the one that goes and try to make sure and try to put, fix things holistically, because that's where I come from. That's my community. I know what it takes, and a lot of people doesn't know what it takes to be black, queer, and trans and show up every day. They don't get it. They just don't. But with love, it will cover it. With love, you can teach. With love, you can open, and you're willing to receive. I'm looking at all the faces here with smiles, and I'm just so happy. And I hope what I'm saying is resonating with you. And I hope that this only doesn't happen here, that we can take this all over. And if you're seeing me, hi, tell your school, we're here, and we won't be erased.
I think a lot of society has this very animal farm mentality where you don't want to be what's seen on the spectrum of things as the less than. So you'll have your gay white men who will be transphobic not all obviously, and because it's like this feeling of the oppression Olympics, and it's like you don't want to be the worst. You don't want to be trans because we're looked at as less. And you have the trans community who has people in it who are looking at non-binary people as less than because it's a new thing. And when it's a new thing, it's just a new word. It's not a new thing. And the fact that like I've had conversations with trans people who live in the binary like myself about this, like, all of a sudden everyone's a grammar, like everyone has a master's degree in English with oh, they means more. I'm like, oh, I'm like, last time I checked, you got a C in high school. So I'm not really sure what your grammar, like all of a sudden everyone is a grammar Nazi for they and them. And, I'm constantly telling, my I have a big block button problem. After I read them and drag them over the coals, then I block them and hopefully they learned. I think this whole idea of society having this animal farm mentality of once the humans die off, the pigs learn to walk on two legs and then they take over. So it's the idea of just every generation having the less than, the less than, the less than, which is disgusting, but I think that's, exactly what we're talking about, the love and spreading the love and having that community, knowing, with the acknowledgement and of reality, knowing that out there, we're going to be seen as one thing, but in here, we're going to be seen as we are. And I think that's usually important, and thank you for housing.
Yeah, I think Chanel's been trying to jump in.
Sorry. No, it's okay. I can wait.
We got lots of time.
Yeah.
So you want to go first?
No, you can go first.
So what I'm gonna say is, and I'll be brief, is like, first of all, I want to commend you both for opening up a home like that. I wish around my time that there was a home that I can go to and I can crash, even just to simply take a shower and eat, right? I'm what they call a late bloomer, so I started maybe 10 years ago. I'm 43 now. But, I didn't know what transgender was. I just knew that when I was 5 years old, I was in the wrong body. And I did not feel at all as a male. And I remember my mom would catch me putting on her heels or putting on lipstick. And I don't know what she used to do with the lipstick and put it on her cheeks, but she would I would do the same thing, right? And one day she caught me and she smacked me so hard. Because, coming from a Dominican background, we Dominicans don't, if you're Caribbean, you know what I mean. It's very masculine. You're a man, you're a man, you're a man, you're a man. My mom, I was even sent to Dominican Republic to live with my uncles, and I was forced to drink Coronas, beers. Yeah, this is why I hate beer nowadays, because I was forced to drink beer because I was told that was the manly thing to do. And so it wasn't up until I was, I lived in Dominican Republic for 3 years. When I was 16, I called my grandmother crying. She came, she picked me up. My grandmother's always been supportive of me. She brought me back to the United States. But I still couldn't tell her that I was trans because I didn't know I was trans, right? So here we go, I'm in my 20s, and I'm dressing up as they call it drag queen. And that's when Melissa said I was a club kid, where she met me because I was doing drag shows, right? Because that was the way that I used to express my femininity, was to do drags. And I remember living with my grandmother and living with my mother, and I had to and I was born and raised in the projects. So it was I had to sneak in the staircases of the projects, get ready before I left my building so nobody would recognize me, or I would have to get dressed behind the streets of Gay Street and Christopher Street. Right. Everybody knows that little area right there. I would have to get dressed in that alleyway and come out oh yeah, this is me. And through doing shows and stuff like that, and I remember I started clubbing out in Queens. And I'm not a Queens resident yet, but I am looking to move to Queens because I do want to represent Queens when I run. And that's a whole nother story. Yeah. Okay. So that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story. But when I decided to transition, I was told, well, if you want to transition, you have to sell yourself, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to get all your surgeries done, get all the things that you need, because they're not going to hire people like us. They're not going to insurance at that time wasn't the best. So it was like, if you want to go get your implants, if you want to go to Mexico and get a botched job, you have to sell yourself, And because of that, like, I did sell myself for a couple of years, right? And when my parents found out, my family found out, they threw me out into the streets. And I ended up living in abandoned buildings, which forced me into a abusive relationship, which in turn, because I wasn't so happy with myself, I ended up turning to drugs. And I did like every drug but shoot myself, you know what I'm saying? But it was just a way of me coping, and as we call, numbing the pain, right? And the reason I do this work is because I didn't even think I was gonna be a advocate. My whole thing was like, oh, I'm just gonna get up every night, do my face, go perform, make some money, pull a client, go back home, go to sleep all day. That was my mentality, right? And I was so miserable with myself that I even tried to commit suicide like a couple of times. Just how miserable I was because I couldn't be the person that I really, really wanted to be, and how to go about, because I didn't have guidance the way I wanted to. And it wasn't until I met, I don't know if I know Melissa knows Jessica Fox, who's like this big time, she was a big time showgirl. She still is around, but she left that scene. And she took me under her wing as her child. And she showed me the rope, and she told me, you can be whatever you want. You don't have to be in this lifestyle if you don't want. And she was the one that actually pushed me to go back to school, back to college, and because of her, I started my transition. And I ended up telling my family, and I was like, listen, this is gonna be me. And if you don't like it, I spent 5 years without none of you in my life. I can spend the rest of my life without you guys at all. But you're gonna miss out on a wonderful person, because through my transition, I've had numerous documents done on me. And on top of that, I've gotten certificates of merit by Bronx Borough President numerous times, and I've gotten awards all around New York City. And I guess that's when my mother, and it wasn't until someone told my mom, they had, my mother went to one of her coworkers they're really cool, and she was crying. She's like, I failed. My child is this now, and I don't know what to do because I don't know where I went wrong. So her friend turned around and said, your daughter's working. She's making a difference for her community. She's getting all these awards. She's like, I'll take your daughter, and you can have my son, who's in the corner of the train station begging to get high. And that's what made my mother open up. And the reason I'm doing this is because other generations to come shouldn't have to struggle the way I had to struggle. You know what I'm saying? Yes, we're very advanced, very, very advanced. But that doesn't mean that we have to sit back, because the fight is not over. Now we have to fight even more, especially with this new administration on the federal level. We definitely have to fight for our rights. We have to fight to not be erased. We have to fight for inclusivity. We have to just fight. And it's not dividing, I'm trans, I'm non-binary, I'm cis, I'm TGNC, so I'm only gonna fight for the trans community. No, because you're non-binary, I'm not gonna fight for you. No, we gotta fight for the whole community in general, under the umbrella. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah. I just wanted to say thank you all for having me, and hearing what everyone's saying. I totally agree with what's being said. And I didn't know that we were going to be filmed in like a virtual reality kind of thing. So recently I've been thinking about queer futurity and like what the future of queer people is going to look like. So it's really interesting that it's happening today. So,
it's coming to a home near you.
Yeah. you know, also what Sasha's doing, I think, is very radical to be housing people. You know, when we heard about the memo that you know, the Trump administration is trying to pass, a lot of people panicked, and then a lot of cis people also were maybe even more outraged than trans people, I feel like. And why I say that is because I feel like trans people have this resilience that they're, and you know, of course it's still a threat. We don't want to be erased, and we won't, but I think helping communities directly the way that Sasha is doing it is a very radical way to do activist work, right? And to give money to trans people in need directly, right? Because sometimes I feel like representation has become this thing that we want to see everywhere, right? Like we're constantly talking about, we need representation. And we've seen what representation can only do so much, right? We can have LGBT people with a lot of power, right? Who still may not necessarily represent the entire community. So I think looking beyond representation is very important too, and kind of thinking of how we're going to survive as a community, you know, at home. How do we find liberation at home, liberation in intra-community spaces, and that's something that I've just been thinking a lot about recently. I am a binary trans woman with a disability, and that's something I've been exploring in my work, and it's really inspiring to hear the stories of trans people that are older than me, and knowing that they've been able to do something, you know, with themselves, with their life. Because it definitely sometimes feels a little scary to be a young trans woman and not know how you're going to survive in the long run, you know? And then on top of that, like if you're dealing with, you know, other identities that maybe can make you a source of violence, of oppression, right? So I'm really just thankful to be here. And I guess I wanted to ask a question to some of the people here, and like, what do you all think are some of the most pressing issues right now that are affecting the trans community, and how do you think you're all dealing with that?
Hello, I'm Ari. My pronouns she, they, depends on the day. I would firstly like to thank Sasha and Sito for what you guys have done. I respect that and I appreciate that a lot. And what's your name? Himana, you raised a point about the Trump administration not accepting like transgender people. Like, even though we are a community, I think like the most alienated people are not only like the people of color, but transgender people, because like they go through so much in this society. And I also have a story because through the Trump administration, I have lost one of my friends when they were saying that, well, Trump won't allow me to be the lady I am in the U.S. Army. Like, she went through a lot, and at that point, with the struggle that she went through, because her family wouldn't accept her, she resorted to suicide, and it really impacted like the people around her. And like, it's just so much to think about, that you yourself, you're trying to find yourself, and there are people fighting against that, and you don't have any other, like, you don't know what to do in yourself. So the only thing you have to resort to is like deciding that I don't want to live like this if I cannot be myself. And I think that it's so stressful for an individual to have to go through not being themselves, because that is what your mind is telling you. So why cannot everybody else agree and just let it go that way? Because if I say, well, I want to be like a football player, and you say, yeah, why can't I be trans? And you accept me the same way, and I want everybody to look at that situation as that.
Okay, you did have a question about what do we consider is one of the most pressing things that we're dealing with now. I think that's going to be different for each individual, right? For me, it's the divide. For me, it is the division that we have amongst ourselves as a community. To me, that is one of the most pressing things that we don't speak to and we don't talk about. When you said earlier, Matt? AJ, when AJ said earlier that, you know, the difference between transgender, binary, and someone who's non-binary, and all these isms that we do, and when Chanel said that, I can't just say that I'm going to just speak for trans rights. I can say this, right? I'm not the expert in someone's life who has a lived experience as non-binary. But I can speak to, I have all the experience and all the expert that I need to speak about me. I'm the expert in my life. I can tell you about me. And how we do that is we get around and we talk about this and we unpack this so we no longer see us as divisive people, because we have places that are, it's difficult to say this because it hurts. When I hear them speak about their friend who lost their life just to exist, and I hear Chanel's story, like, we all have different narratives on how we got to become who we are. But we're here, right? So while we're here, we need to remove the divides that keep us separated while we're here. I was just telling someone that we get into this henpecking match. Every day on Facebook, you see it. I know you see it. Non-binary, oh, they're this and they're cross-dressers, and I'm the definition of what trans, and you're not real, you're late, you're 5 years, or this is new, this is old, this is that, this is that. If we're henpecking each other, how do we expect for them to understand it? So while we're sitting here henpecking each other and trying to see who wins the vocabulary Olympics and who wins this trauma race, we're all being carted off the slaughter. We're all at risk of losing our identities. We're all at risk of trying to be erased. We're all at risk. So we need to, for me, the pressing issue is to remove that divide, to move closer towards the lines of intersectionality, honoring privilege, respecting your privilege, and adding to the solution, not becoming the problem. I may be the only Black trans person that works for my organization. There's community members that say I'm the token. I will be the token, because with token comes privilege. That privilege gave me an access to employment that you as a disabled trans woman don't have. I recognize my privilege in that. So I have the utmost responsibility to represent you and anyone else that I can in that space. Me being a token has given me accesses and on platforms to speak about my journey, to teach about my existence. And when we come against each other and you're someone else to say, well, my narrative is a little bit more traumatizing than yours, so I should have the stage. We need to stop the henpecking. We need to do that. That is the most pressing thing and the pressing matter for me as a Black trans woman working in nonprofit, that we remove these divides, we become more inclusive, we just grow together and we learn. Every day cannot be an ouch moment. We cannot continue to fight each other and then pretend that we want to go against the Trump administration. We have to really get together, and this is just the start. Virtual reality, I didn't think that I would ever, someone would be sitting in front of a this ball. I don't even know if I don't even know if there's people looking. Like, I'm like, is the audience there? Do they have any questions. But at the end of the day, we really, and this is the most pressing issue for me, this social divide that we have amongst each other and as it pertains to community, but we'll throw that word around every time. Community for funding, community for this, community for that, and then we get into these spaces and we shake hands and we love each other and we make commitments and we go back to our own homes and then that's it.
So the biggest problem that I see really is transcends our trans identities, and it's the American story, it's racism really. What happens is our battles are fought, victories are won, and why people get all the rewards, and people of color continue to be left behind, whether you're LGBT, GNC, or not. When it comes to housing, healthcare, access to education, resource, wealth, it's the story repeats itself over again. And now pathetically, it repeats itself over and over again within our trans communities. And so that's the bad news. The good news is it's now trans people of color are rising to leadership to continue to have white people speak on behalf of diminished communities. It's done. Stick a fork in it, it's done. And what's mostly important, the people with access to all these things that we've been fighting for have to support this new generation of leadership. You know, whether it's going to through politics or advocacy or art, you know, it's really important. And I used to work at GMHC, and in the 90s in GMHC, all the clients were sick, gay, white men, and now all those white men have access to health care, and all the left are poor people and poor people of color. And so whatever it is, whether it's housing works, it's all poor people of color. So whatever victories are won, in the end, people continue to get left behind. It's the same people that get left behind in our community as have been for 100 years, and that's people of color. And we have to fight for that. And we have to be aware and knowledgeable that when it comes time to this battle, it really, you know, as a trans person, I have a career, I own a home, I'm doing great as a trans person. Well, there's a reason for that. And so it's important to use that access to privilege to work on behalf of our communities that don't have the same.
Thank you. I think Asher wanted to join the conversation.
So one of my pressing issues goes along with what Ari said, is our mental health. Collectively, I think trans mental health is taking a real heavy hit right now, and there's not a lot of support. I'm very lucky enough that I have enough money to pay for a therapist, but only just enough to see, you know, twice a month instead of, you know, maybe every week. And I'm lucky that I even get to go twice a month. And I wish there was more support available as far as mental health, so we can talk, so we don't spiral into these dark places, because like our suicide rate is appallingly high. And I think that's one of our biggest problems. And with what Melissa said, to kind of put that there and then move on, we need to start reaching back. Kind of what you said, not just breaking down barriers, but reaching back and grabbing the people behind us and pulling them into the circle. There's a huge gap between ages and generational things, specifically in the trans community. So I am a femme non-binary AFAB person, and a lot of people who maybe are older may have never even heard what they're like. Okay, what does that mean? I think sometimes we need to talk about our vocabulary, but we need to respect that, like, a lot of younger people don't necessarily respect somebody else might identify in a different way, because that was the words that they used at that time. And these are the words that we're using. So let's just, these are my words. I won't use my words for you. You won't use your words for you. And just pull people into the circle and move forward.
That's actually a big part of my movie Words, is about how, like, even things that people said in their interviews in this documentary, probably it was filmed 2 years ago prior to Trump. I'm sure their answers would have been a lot different. The words that they used were a lot different. Films get a lot of slack for things that were said in the past that were totally okay to say, at least thought to be okay. And I'm sure there's things that we've all said that aren't okay to say today, that we've said in our past. I always think that if we don't want to punch up the person we were 5 years ago in the face, we're not changing enough. But yeah, I think words, I always think about that, like how, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago rather, not to age myself, but if you called me queer 10 years ago, there would have been a fight. Call me queer now, I'm like, yeah, I'm fucking queer, what's up? Let's go to the party, you know, but like 10 years ago, you called me, it's a different story. Yeah, so very interesting point.
Just to kind of touch base on that, it's also just to talk on access of education, and not many people have access to these resources to learn these new terms. And that's why a lot of older trans people get kind of left behind and alienated from their own community. And I completely agree with you on bringing community together, because that's how we even got to this fucking point to begin with. Like, that's how we even got here and have survived thus far, is from intense community organizing. We seem to have forgotten history, like completely forgotten history. And also to touch base on what you said, visibility and representation. So there's like this whole thing of hypervisibility coming about right now with trans bodies, and it just kind of commodifies them and tokenizes them as opposed to giving them anything. Like, they just use the visual of trans bodies as opposed to giving them fucking money, resources, anything that'll actually push them forward in life. What does an image do? I mean, it does something, but in terms of actually pushing for real acceptance, real survival, what does it do? You know, and that needs to be talked about a lot more than it has. We all keep pushing for this idea of representation and visibility, but with that needs to be access, with that needs to be resources, with that needs to be rights.
People need to put their money where their mouth is.
Right. Am I allowed to curse?
I'm not policing any kind of language or censoring anything.
We're never back.
Girls, don't tell that to Sasha. I just wanted to say, like, as a black trans woman, when you're talking about visibility, it's just like everyone wants to fuck us, pay to fuck us, but no one wants to feed us or house us, you know? And to talk about what Jimena said, like, we are fucking... I've known Cecil for 8 years. She knew me when I was Alexander. I met Cecil for the first time October 15th. We have a house. We have been vetting since the house went on the market November 2nd. We put down the deposit November 3rd. Honey, I'm not a millionaire. I work at 2 different tattoo shops. That's not money. You know artists don't make any money. We have not slept for more than 2 hours for the last month because we are constantly trying to make sure people have housing. Because if it's not a collective, if it's a 10-bedroom house, individual lease, honey. If your rent isn't paid, that's not on me, that's on you. We have been vetting every single day to get people in this house. We have people, I have no credit, I'm not even gonna lie. My sugar daddy signed my lease, okay? You do what you have to do. But we have been in this house and we have been constantly trying to make sure it is a community house. You know how many community houses I've went to where they're like, yes, we accept trans women, we accept this, and it is 10 gay guys and 1 white trans man. That is not something I rock with. Community has to be collective. I want to be in a house where I feel comfortable. You know, I want to be in a house where I don't feel like an exposed brick. You know what I'm saying? But everyone's into exposed bricks nowadays. I want to feel comfortable. I want everyone in this room to feel comfortable. Because yes, we are here, but do we all feel comfortable? There's so many stories, there's so many traumas, there's so much energy. What are we willing to share? A lot of us are so hesitant to talk. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't want to talk. I hate my voice. That's just disgusting, you know? But I want all of us to talk because there's so many of us in here. When are we gonna have this moment again? I'm a black trans woman. I can leave this and you might never see me again. Okay? The life expectancy for me is 35. We went up from 32. I'm 26. You do the math because I don't. And I want her to talk because she has been collectively vetting people with me to get this house going. And she hasn't said much, but there's a reason why there's a ring on her finger. So please talk. Please say something to this audience.
I mean, everything Sasha said is true. It's been a very exhausting process trying to find housing, but the thing is, once we secured this house, the entire idea was to give people a safe place to transition, right? A home, a family that they can come home to, food on their plate, a place to shower, a place to shit, a place to sleep, like just all basic things that most of us don't fucking have. Most of us don't have and have to go through great, uncomfortable lengths and put our lives at risk to have. So that's the entire point. So if y'all need a place to crash,
Wonderful. On that brilliant and beautiful note, we have we have about 3 minutes left for questions. Okay. But also, Jimena, if you wanted to contribute something off of that, please.
I just wanted to say that this discussion has been very, I think, like heartfelt and productive. And also finding community also, like, I think when it comes to community, we also find community online now, right? And like some of my closest friends I've met online. My friend Ava's here, and she's a wonderful artist, actor, writer, trans woman, and yeah, and we met online. So it's just really wonderful to see how like community is like building, you know.
Any last questions or any final comments? Please go ahead. Oh, you need to be mic'd or have a...
So I'm cis, right? A cis woman. So my question is more for the allies and the people that don't identify as trans. Like, what are we doing to like put ourselves at risk for the rest of our like people that are here, right? Like, if you're not risking your stability, then you're not doing a good job. So, just wanted to add that. That's it.
I just want to say there are other ways to help. Donate directly to people, to trans women, and help people. There are GoFundMes, there are links. Follow Sasha. She has an entire donate section. Throw your bills there. It makes a difference. It really does. Like if I'll make it for you.
I mean, I do have a cash app, but I just want to say thank you. I mean, I've learned so much by being here, and I know we're pressed for time, but thank you for that. Thank you for the information that was shared here today. I like how you spoke to the generational gap with the ages, because as language progresses for the new generation, you know, I mentioned earlier the intergeneration and combining them two, we need to be respectful of pronouns and how people choose to identify. To me, that's very important, and it's very helpful when we acknowledge that someone who may not have had the access for higher education or to go to school. Back in my day, college was this sought out dream that would never be attainable, especially if you're growing up in the projects and being Black. So I didn't have those advantages, but my experience kind of trumps that. So I say that, thank you for saying that, because it was important, and that's my narrative. I'm in the space that I am basically built on my experience. I do not subscribe to being a scholar, but I am going back to school next year. So I look forward to seeing all.
Nice. I think what someone was saying about what can our straight and cis allies do, I think it's important to just help with the pronoun situation. Like, if you hear someone call a trans person the wrong pronoun, even if it's not out of, you know, being malicious, if it's not them being, you know, if they just say the wrong pronoun, like, do us a solid, and just like it gets tiring. I work in theater and film. I meet 40 new people every week. It's exhausting to have to remind people and tell people every day. So just do a solid and just be like, that's a boy, you know, that's a girl, that's a they, you know, like, help us out a little bit, do a little of the work for us on a very, if you're not, you know, financially able to help. I think just helping out in the smallest little ways really makes a big difference.
And I wanted to say one more thing. Like, I agree with the final comments that are being said, but also to allies that are here and here. I think during this time there's a lot of increasing transphobia, you know, and that ultimately results in violence and oppression of all, you know, of all people, really, because to be transphobic is to deny every single person the ability to express themselves in whatever way that they want, right? So I think to remind ourselves not to normalize the transphobia that is being spoken of in, like, you know, from this administration, and have dialogue at home and inter-community dialogue as well. because we're gonna leave, you know, today, we're gonna leave, and this discussion doesn't just stay here. You know, we should continue the discussion, and again, not just see trans people as tokens. Like, oh, we had a trans event at York. It's so progressive, right? Like, it's like, how can we bring that back into our communities, into our classrooms, into our homes, and actually make impact? Yeah.
Thank you. What a perfect way to end. And maybe it doesn't have to end. Maybe the conversation can continue in any capacity. So thank you all so much for being here, and for sharing and giving us a lot to think about and work towards. So in solidarity.